Anti-gun advocates will always gravitate toward the gun being the problem. Now, today I'm going to flip that argument on its head.
Dan Was, author of Good Gun, Bad Guy,
Second Amendment advocate and author extraordinaire, Dan Was.
Good Gun, Bad Guy. Dan Was joins me now.
Dan Was is my guest, and he's here.
Of course, the political left needs violence in society. Violence keeps people fearful and gives politicians a reason for people to vote for them. In other words, look at all this violence, vote for me, and I'll keep you safe. But what about violence that's acted out with a firearm? Now, if you listen to the gun grabbers, you would think that guns are the leading cause of violence. But first, we have every possible gun restriction and regulation that a human being can think of. So why doesn't the violence stop? Because violence is a part of human nature. But the anti-gun crowd will argue that we need more gun restrictions to stop the gun-related violence. They call it gun violence, which is a fake term that they created. Why is it fake? Because guns can't be violent. Only people can make the conscious choice to pull the trigger. But you never hear them talking about criminals who pull the trigger. They love those people because they continue to commit violent crimes, giving the Democrats more fuel for their anti-gun fear campaigns and more justification for unconstitutional firearm legislation. Moms Demand Action would be out of business if it weren't for the political left's violent actors. So we ask them, what if, for an entire year, there was no gun-related crime in the country, not one single instance of a crime where a gun was involved? You'd think this would be exactly what the gun grabbers want, but this is the last thing they want. Because if there was no gun-related crime, there would be no justification for gun restrictions. Look at London, England. In London, violent crime exceeded that of New York City, which many consider a comparable city for several reasons. What happened was guns were banned in London, but violent crime didn't slow down. It increased slightly. Now, the criminals just used knives. So we know violence is not decreased in the absence of guns. But remember, gun restrictions are not put in place to stop crime. No, not really. I mean, that's what they'll tell you, of course. But gun restrictions are put in place to keep the citizens unarmed and defenseless. It's about government control of the people under the guise of keeping people safe. Think about it. They can't tell you we need more gun restrictions because we're afraid that the people will have too much power over the government. So they tell you we need more gun restrictions to keep you safe. All while they create more of the violence they claim they're keeping you safe from. Let's suppose pro-gun Republicans took over every city and every state and did a nationwide anti-crime campaign. And what would that look like? Well, President Trump did exactly that in Washington, D.C., and Democrats hated it because it showed the entire country that gun control is not the answer to violent crime. Arrests and focusing on the perpetrators are the solution. Now, President Trump significantly reduced all crime, including violent crime in Washington, D.C., without implementing one single gun restriction. As a matter of fact, he eased gun restrictions by implementing an executive order directing agencies to expedite concealed carry permit processing in Washington, D.C., and his DOJ sued the District of Columbia, challenging its restrictions on certain semi-automatic firearms, arguing that they violate the Second Amendment, which they do. Let's assume there were no gun restrictions and everyone was able to walk into a gun shop and purchase whatever they wanted without any question, and all the bad guys were locked up. No crime and no gun restrictions. The political left cannot have this, which is why they will not put the bad guys in jail. This is why they create bail reform laws and early release policies while still calling for gun restrictions. They claim they need more gun restrictions because it will reduce violent crime. Does this really make any sense? Wouldn't you just put the bad guys in jail to actually solve the problem of crime and be done with it? I mean, Don't we want to get to the cause of violence? Well, you would if you really wanted to create a safe environment for people. If that was truly your goal. But Democrats love violence because it keeps people in fear and it gives them a reason to implement more gun restrictions on their political opposition. It's really that simple. When Archie Bunker said pass out the pistols to every passenger on the airplane to prevent skyjackings, there was a point.
Now I want to talk about another thing that's on everybody's mind today, and that's your stick-ups and your skyjackings, which, if that was up to me, I could end the skyjackings tomorrow.
You could?
All you got to do is arm all your passengers. And then he ain't got no more superiority there. He ain't going to dare to pull out no rod. And then your airlines, then they wouldn't have to chase the passengers on the ground no more. They just pass out the pistols at the beginning of the trip, and they pick them up again at the end. Case closed.
The presumption in Archie's brash and somewhat naive personality was that people on the plane are good people and would not use the firearm to hurt others, and that the bad guys would be on their best behavior if they knew there was opposition, otherwise known as good guys with guns. That scene was a joke, of course, because not everyone would be trained to use a firearm, and simply passing them out would bring with it a host of other potential problems. But the underlying assumption was that good people don't commit crimes, and if good people have firearms, the bad guys would be kept on their best behavior. But in a world where Democrats have any power, there will always be violence, and there will always be perpetrators because it serves them. The anti-gunners argument is often that people can't be trusted in society. We must have some level of trust. With 8.2 billion people on the planet, just walking out our front door requires some level of trust in others. I mean, we trust doctors with our lives. We trust financial advisors with our life savings. Heck, we even trust people we've never met driving toward us head on at 75 miles per hour on the highway in 3,000-pound vehicles with nothing separating us but a painted yellow line on the road. But we don't trust people with guns. Why is that? It's because we've been conditioned through a radical and very deceiving propaganda campaign that guns are the cause of violence and not the people pulling the trigger. Somehow the people are simply, and without any explanation, a victim of the gun in their own hand. We're taught to believe that if the killer didn't have access to the gun, he wouldn't kill. Unfortunately, many who live among us and can't think for themselves actually believe this. The minute someone becomes violent, shows their violence, or commits a violent act, that is when that person should be red flagged. Now, violent people should be locked up, and once they commit an act of violence, legal action should be taken. Instead, felonies are reduced to misdemeanors by politically motivated judges, and many are sent back out onto the streets with no bail. We can't ban all guns because someone might become angry, just like we can't ban vehicles because someone might drive drunk. We have trust in our fellow citizens until they prove to us that they can't be trusted. So you wonder why there's an increase in the number of restrictions the political left is implementing, while also an increase in violent foreign immigrants and more perpetrators being let out onto the streets. Now, the cause of violence is being perpetuated while the ability of good people to defend themselves from the political left's violence is being diminished. And the propaganda? Well, the only reason there's so much talk about the AR-15 and so-called assault weapons is because that's the firearm the anti-gun lobby chose to use in their fear campaign. They believed that those rifles are the best marketing tool to cultivate irrational gun fear. They could have just as easily chosen to use shotguns or handguns. For them, it's not about the rifle as much as it is about the best way to build an anti-gun narrative and the most effective propaganda while instilling the most fear and anger to gain public support for gun control laws. Now, the fear that's created around semi-automatic rifles can easily be used when the anti-gun lobby begins targeting other firearms. The fear component and the firearm itself are easily interchangeable with the right marketing strategies behind them. Imagine the support for gun rights if the mainstream media marketing strategies and propaganda were used to promote firearms as the best way to protect your home and family. This is all political, and it has nothing to do with safety. I'm Dan Was. Thanks for watching Good Gun, Bad Guy. And remember, the Second Amendment is not a privilege. It's your right.